Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and today we're going to be going over a guitar from a brand that has been requested for a few months on this channel. This line of guitars has moved production from Korea to China. I previously owned a Korean version of this guitar, so I'm interested to see how the modern equivalent does coming out of the new factory. And that guitar is a Gretsch G5622t. Let's have a look at it. This guitar is a semi-hollow body guitar that does have a center block going down the middle of it. Will help a little bit with cutting out some of that feedback. Has a little bit of weight though compared to a traditional hollow body. Comes with a real Bigsby on it. New bone nut. I'm excited to get this thing on the bench and take a closer look. Alright, this is one of the newer finishes available on this model. It's called Imperial Stain. Very nice grain in the wood. If you want something very natural looking, this is right up your alley. If you're not familiar with the older version of this model, there are a few differences, mainly being these pickups. These used to come with Super Helotron pickups, which people in the Gretsch community loved. They raved about those. So when they changed them to the new ones that are called Broadtrons, they weren't exactly the most thrilled about that. They kind of wanted them to keep the Super Helotrons. We're going to have our own say when we plug it in, and I'll let you know because I've obviously played the other ones in the past. You have a B70 vibrato system here. And if you're not familiar with the Gretsch kind of control layout, you have this knob right here all the way at the top. This is your master volume that controls everything. Then you have a separate volume for each of the bridge and the neck pickups and one master tone, which will control both. Lining things out here, you have a three-way toggle switch. How does this feel? That feels real loose. That feels pretty, yeah. Not as great, but import electronics, sometimes these things happen. As long as it functions well, I'm not going to have too much to complain about. And capping things off here, we have an Adjust-O-Matic bridge. Now, whenever I get in a guitar that has binding on it, especially one that has F-holes, I like to see just how good of a job they did at the transitions from where the paint or the laminate ends and it goes into the white part of the binding itself here. On this guitar, I will say it's not perfect, but it's better than the Sire was in that aspect. Whether or not it will be as good of a guitar as the Sire, that remains to be seen. But overall, the quality of the binding finish of itself around the rest of the body looks pretty good. You have a little bit of a kind of discoloration thing. Not the perfect job where it actually meets the bottom of the neck there, but that's kind of to be expected. Again, a very, very nice stain on the back of this instrument. Rounding out the other side here. Yeah, this is absolutely pretty good when it comes to the quality of the binding job on this instrument in particular. All right, checking out the neck of this guitar, there's a few things I'd like to comment on here, but first, I always feel the fret edges to see how smooth they feel. That's strange. So right around the 12th fret, actually the 11th fret, they start to feel a little bit sharper and less kind of sanded down than they do towards the top of the guitar. So if you're somebody that plays cowboy chords, you're going to be in heaven. But that's not to say that these are obtrusive in any way, shape, or form. They're just simply not as nicely done as the ones higher up on the instrument. Now this neck, I find it's interesting because this falls into the Fender family of products. This is actually Laurel. So it's not Pau-Ferro. And if you look at Fender guitars that are in the same kind of price range, those come with Pau-Ferro. I actually think that this is a good decision on their part because I think when you mix in the much lighter wood grain of the Pau-Ferro kind of on the traditional Gretsch body, it might not aesthetically kind of come across as nice as even the Laurel does. Other things worth noting is this is a very, very thin U-neck. I noticed it straight away as soon as I picked the thing up. I was like, oh wow, it actually surprised me how thin this neck is. So if you're somebody that's used to playing 335 style instruments, this is going to feel like a paperclip. There's just no other way around that. You have a Graphtec new bone nut. That's pretty cool. You don't have to worry about a plastic nut or anything like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's check how the frets are in terms of levelness. High. Second fret is definitely high. All right, so frets 2 and 3 are a little high, but nothing that should really affect the playability. And one thing to keep in mind here is when you get in a guitar like this and in this price range, you shouldn't really be surprised when you have to bring it in to get the frets leveled or kind of just optimized, so to speak. I don't think we're going to have any problems playing this guitar as is, but I always highly recommend bringing your guitar into a luthier, making sure the nut is cut really well and well lubricated, especially when you have a Bigsby equipped instrument. It is of the most vital of importance to be able to make sure that there is no friction within anything, that whether it's the bridge or the nut. When it comes to these things, you want everything to be moving very, very smoothly, and if you don't have that, you're going to have massive tuning stability problems, which is something that some people complain about with Bigsby's. I've found so long as you have a quality cut nut that is well lubricated with something like Big Ben's nut sauce, and the saddles are decently kind of lubricated as well and set to go, then you're not going to have problems with keeping the guitars in tune. All right, looking at the back of the headstock here, you have your serial number, made in China. These are Grover style tuners on them. They're not branded. And then you can kind of see, not sure how well it's going to translate with the light there. This is where the second piece of the neck is. This is not just one piece of wood made to make the neck, but that's not something that's a big deal. Again, that's something that a lot of guitars have. Even the PRS S2s, they have the same things. They have a scarf joint to connect the headstock to the actual rest of the neck, and then obviously another one towards the base of the guitar where this is going to meet the body, where it's another piece of wood as well. All right, now that we've had a closer look at this guitar on the bench, my assessment of the fit and finish are definitely passing grade. I think they did a really good job. There's no egregious errors or kind of really bad issues with the binding or anything like that. No issues with the frets to a big degree. I mean, a little bit of a high fret here and there is not something that is worthy of being pointed out as a massive flaw as far as the instrument coming, but you know, we're going to have to see how this thing plays and sounds before we can make our final judgment. So let's get to it. I gotta say, one thing I love about doing this is playing guitars I wouldn't normally get to play because I'm not so sure I would have picked this guy out, but I think that there are some really good qualities about it. And I'm gonna start there on my positives. First of all, the stability of it is fantastic. It really is. This nut was cut fantastically well. When I was using the Bigsby vibrato, I wasn't having any tuning issues. I made sure to extra stretch out the strings because that's another trick that you should be doing whenever you're using a vibrato system. Specifically, the Bigsby maximizes the most when you do that as far as the stability goes of the instrument. I thought it was great in that aspect. The neck, if you like a thinner neck, this will be for you. It's very fast playing. There was no real problems with it. I didn't notice the 2 frets being a little bit higher than the other ones in practice, so that's a really good thing as well. When it came to the actual tones of the instrument, I thought it sounded great, clean, really good clean. But when it started to get into the overdrive, I could hear a lot of mud, and I could start to understand why some of the people that are big Gretsch fans that used to like the Korean Gretsches with the Helotron pickups I referenced earlier in this video might be a bit disappointed with these new Broadtrons. Now, there are some ways where you can kind of mitigate this, but I think that this isn't the biggest problem for 2 reasons. The first reason being most people that are going to be purchasing a guitar like this are not going to be playing with a ton of gain. That's just typically not what you see when you see people playing Gretsches for the most part. And when they do use gain, it's that old kind of twangy gain with just enough dirt on it to break things up, but nothing too over the top. So as far as super versatility goes, this guitar doesn't necessarily have that due to that, but it's one of those things that can always be replaced. And if you love the way a guitar feels and plays, the electronics, they're something that you can always swap out should you decide to do so. Other than that, I mean, this is a good guitar. This is just strange, man. I don't love this guitar. I don't think that I would recommend this guitar for $7.99 or $8.99, and there's a few reasons for that. The first reason being, when you think about the fact that this comes in just a wedge box, that's fine, but a Stratocaster, a Telecaster coming in a wedge box is a totally different animal than a Gretsch semi-hollow body coming in a wedge box. And that's because it's very easy to get a pretty decent gig bag for not a ton of money, even if you don't want a hard case for those kinds of guitars. But with these kinds of guitars, it's a bit more expensive, and you also want to spend a little bit extra to protect this instrument because, let's be honest, this is not built as durable as something like a Telecaster is, and that's just kind of the design flaw of it. It's not necessarily a flaw, I should say, but it's just, it's inherent with the design. Just like a Les Paul, you wouldn't want to put an expensive Les Paul in a cheap soft shell case because you're asking for problems. If it drops, it's going to be a nightmare. And it's kind of the same scenario with this. My recommendation here, my final verdict when it comes to this guitar, if you're really into these guitars, there's a lot of them that are made. I would buy one of these used. I would spend $600. And if I wanted to really take this thing out, not worry about it, I'd wait until somebody had already gone through the trouble of purchasing a case and included it as part of the deal. Whether that is, a high quality gig bag or preferably a hard shell case, then you really got nothing to worry about outside of if you wanted to change the pickups, because the hardware on this is fine as is. I didn't mention this earlier when I was talking about the stability because I don't particularly believe that the tuners have a whole lot to do with the actual stability of an instrument, but they have a really good ratio on them, so the fine tuning is a lot better than some of the other import brands that I've played in the past, so it has that going for it as well. But overall, I'm really happy that I got to play this guitar. It was a lot of fun, but my hand was really starting to cramp out. I can't play these paper thin necks. I know that's just me, and that's my own kind of physiology and how things are as a guitar player. I can't do it. But if you're somebody who plays a modern style Fender guitar, or even something like an ESP, like the green one that we're going to be demoing this next week on Friday, I can't wait for that one. This neck is going to be very easy for you to get used to in that sense because it is really narrow. But if you're somebody that's used to playing a 335 or 335 style instrument, for example, my 77X Robato, the size of that neck, that's not like a gigantic baseball bat neck, but it feels like one playing this right afterwards. It just, Yeah, so as far as a traditional semi-hollow body instrument goes, this is one of the thinnest necks that I've ever played on any model. Granted, it's a little bit different, you know, you're going for a completely different vibe and aesthetic when you buy a Gretsch versus, you know, a Gibson or another kind of variant going after the Gibson style. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about this finish. Would you rock this Imperial stain? Yeah? Kind of like the 70s furniture style. I don't know, it's kind of growing on me the more that I've seen it. But this guitar has sold, so you won't be seeing it anymore on the channel. We won't be able to be doing any other comparisons. I'm packing it up right after this is finished filming. Subscribe if you haven't already. Comment like I said, and I will see you tomorrow for another guitar related video. Take it easy, everybody.